I can see a path. Door's still open, but you could kind of tell in his body language and just the way he was answering some questions, like, maybe he hasn't processed it all yet, but understands it's a very realistic scenario that he's not back the next season.
Yeah, when the Bruins, I've noticed that when the Bruins don't have guys locked up like that at this point, it usually means they're done. And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. And we're presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, you want to go Celtics playoffs, you want to go to a Red Sox game, you want to go to wherever you live, the closest sporting event, maybe a concert. Game Time's the place to do it. So go use that promo code CLNS. I'm Evan Marinofsky, joined today by Joe Pohoryles from the Hockey News. Joe, what's up?
Not much, just kind of decompressing after the season. There's a lot to go through, a lot to discuss, and so just sort of dialing down from all that.
And we were talking beforehand, and we didn't know this. We didn't plan this. Maybe you're following me. It'd be kind of weird if you were. But we are going to the same place this weekend for Memorial Day. We're both going to be in the Poconos. That's fate. That's fate, Joe. That's pretty damn good.
Do like a remote pod, like separate from this one, like just in the mountain scenery, the woods, everything, like diving into everything else.
I was gonna say we should go and try to spot a real Bruin. That's what we should
do.
Like, yeah. I think
I've seen one there before. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So you've been, I have not. So I was kind of taking some tips and advice from you. And I would love to come across a bear because it'd be great content. Yeah. I mean, we might get killed, but if it's in the process of getting content, that's a damn good way to go.
I will say I've only seen it once in 23 years that I've been out there, but I also was not actively searching for one in the process. So maybe it's just a matter of you got to actually go looking for it than waiting for it to come to you. So
maybe that's what it has to do. So we'll go looking for a bear. We'll do a podcast. Maybe we can have the bear give a comment for the podcast. I'm sure it'll understand. So that'll be great, but it'll be fun. I'm excited. I'll be texting you for tips. Hopefully there's service out there. So that should be very fun. This off season, it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of cap space. There's a lot of guys' futures up in the air. We'll get into all that. I'm curious, the people have heard my spiel on what they should do this offseason, what I think of the offseason. I'm curious where you're at with this offseason. What are you looking for them to do? What should they do? What do you think they'll do? Just kind of where you're at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot easier said than done, but when I'm looking at the whole of like the NHL roster, obviously there's the whole question with Ullmark, but whether he stays or goes, they're going to have Swayman on a long-term contract. They're going to come to terms with that. That's got to be priority number one for them. So they'll have him in place. In the playoffs, he's proven, he can take a larger workload and sort of, carry the mantle for the goaltending. It doesn't have to be an even 50-50 split. So I'm sure they'll find, if Ullmark goes, I'm sure they'll find a competent backup, whether that's elevating Brandon Bussey or getting someone externally. I don't think that's going to be super hard to find, I think, if Swayman's the true number one. And then looking at the defense, I was thinking about it at the playoff series. I mean, they had 9 guys on the playoff roster that were, theoretically in the rotation. Grzelcyk kind of fell out. Forbert isn't really in the mix. They're both free agents, most likely gone unless they come back in a reserve role.
Grzelcyk is definitely gone. I think Forbert's probably gone as well.
Yeah. So, but the 6 that they ended up playing towards the end of the series, I think that's probably the 6 that if you're the Jim Montgomery, I think those are the 6 you're most comfortable rolling with. And if they get a 7th or an 8th veteran or someone that they want to bring in just as depth or to test the group, I think those 6 defensemen, they'd be pretty comfortable rolling with to start the season. And so in my mind, the biggest thing is just addressing top 6 scoring, whether that's on the wing, especially if Debrusk ends up walking, which it's seeming increasingly likely that he will.
Yeah.
And if you really want to and have the room, getting a true number one center, obviously there's not that many out there that you can reasonably get. So whether that's possible or not is another conversation. But I think, yeah, long story short, top of the line scoring, I think, is the biggest need and probably the most urgent one when you look at the rest of the lineup too. That can kind of be filled in with, little bits and pieces, those extra signings that you see, maybe after the first week or so when all the big guys are off the table.
It's 100% the biggest thing they need. They
Yeah.
need a number one center. They need scoring. You mentioned an interesting point on D about how being comfortable with those 6 guys going into next year. And that's, obviously Lowry, McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, and Wotherspoon and Peak. And I think it's interesting because I view Wotherspoon as a really good 7th defenseman. Now,
Mm-hmm.
he's shown obviously that he can step in and be that, a 6th guy, 3rd pairing left shot defenseman. If they had the money left over, and again, this is just if they have the money left over, I wouldn't hate like a Brendan Dillon. Like I wouldn't hate like a
Mm-hmm.
veteran left shot guy who you can probably get on, I don't know, somewhere in the $2, $3, $4 million range, who is reliable, and you could even pair with McAvoy to begin the season and have Lowry on that 3rd pair and let him work his way up. And if he supplants, Brendan Dillon on the 1st pair, that's fine. And you put Dillon on the 3rd pair. And there's other guys like that too. It's not just Dillon. And again, we'll see what the market kind of kind of dictates. But to me, like if you have money left over, like I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm fully set with the 6 they have. I would like at least one reinforcement. But it's not my number one thing. Like, I don't want them being like, all right, we went and signed Brendan Dillon. Now we can't go out and get Elias Lindholm. Like, I don't want that to be the case. But if you have the money and you can make the money work, I'm all for it. Because I think they could use a veteran left shot D, especially to kind of settle down a guy like Charlie McAvoy at times.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think my overall point to that was just you don't need to throw 5 to 6 million at
Oh
a
God, yeah,
defenseman. Like
no,
that's if you want to bring
Noah
in a veteran and
Hannafin,
you got the
no,
money,
not anymore.
then yeah. I agree with that. I think yeah, it's not the most pressing need, and if they've got something left over, then why not bring someone in if you got the money to do it and just add more depth to that group overall.
Well, that's the thing, and it's interesting because in past years, when they've had money, they've tried to find, veteran-ish defensemen who are sort of value adds that can sort of elevate their play. Like Derek Forbort was a good example of that. John Moore a couple of years ago was an example of that, and neither really could, take the ball and run with it as top pairing guys. So I think, if you can, and I don't think you need a top pairing defenseman. That's the biggest thing. Is like you've got Lindholm, you've got Carlo, you've got McAvoy, and Lowry looks to be in the mix for it. Again, we'll see what he's like in camp next year because, like a good example is Connor Clifton in 2019 during that playoff run was dynamite in the playoffs. And he didn't really play in the top 4 at all, but it was like, all right, that dude is dynamic enough where like you could probably stick him, in the lineup every night, and potentially he's a guy that could work his way into the top 4. Didn't really happen in Boston. I think Buffalo is planning on that happening. We'll see if that takes place next year. But the playoffs are all adrenaline, right? Like you can do that, but can you do it over the course of a season? I think Lowry can.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't hate him starting on the 3rd pair. But again, if he's kicking ass in training camp and preseason games and stuff, it's like, all right, well, like that's a top. I mean, he's a top pairing guy going forward. It's just whether or
Mm-hmm.
not he, begins the season next year as a top pairing guy. One guy whose future is definitely not, a little up in the air is Linus Ullmark. And Don Sweeney had some interesting comments on Ullmark on Wednesday at the end of season presser. Basically, saying, hey, the tandem's great. I like the tandem, but, if we can make the money work, great. But maybe Linus Ullmark changes his mind on the trading front, which then kind of confirms he does not want to be traded at the moment. He has the no trade clause. What do you think ends up happening with that?
Yeah, it's tough to. I think it depends. It's kind of like I don't know if catch-22 is the right word, but like you either have to see what they're going to do with the forward group in free agency if it gets that far, or to determine like how much money they'll have left
Mm-hmm.
and if they can keep Allmark, or is it a type of thing where if they can find a way to trade him, then that clears up even more money, and that therefore influences the caliber of free agent that they get. I think if they can find a path to trade him, they will do so, just based on the fact that if they're committing X amount of money and X amount of years to Swayman, and Ullmark, obviously he's 30, approaching 31,
Yep.
he can still play, up to his standard for another, 3 to 4 years at least,
Yeah, I'd say 3
depending
to
on how he
5.
plays out. Yeah, so if you're the Bruins, you can't really afford to hand him another massive contract of that many years, even if it's less money, just based on the way things play. I mean, I don't know, but just realistically speaking, if they want to maximize what they can get out of him, or his value, you're going to have to do it at some point this offseason with, even though it's a year left and it may not be the return that a ton of people think he would deserve. It's better than letting him walk for nothing, especially if you're committing to Swayman for the long term as someone that can carry a bigger starter's load. So I think if they can find an avenue, they trade him. And again, if his trade list is only, I believe, 15, or it's going from 16 to 15 or something
Yep.
along those lines. So most of those teams might be in the West where they prefer to move him, but depending on the scenario, that's still half the league to work with. So I think if they can get it done, they'll do it in some way.
I was going to say, you look at what Sweeney said yesterday. If we can make the math work, we're going to have the best tandem. If we can't, we're going to explore, and Linus may come to us and change his mind. That may occur as well. Right now, he's really happy. We were very happy to sign Linus. In a perfect world, we would keep the tandem because I think it's damn good, but we're going to explore opportunities. My phone is going to ring, and I'm going to make calls. That's just what the job requires. I think he's got to go. I do. I know I mentioned this on the last Bruins beat, but I just, money-wise, potential-wise with Swayman, and you have, the other thing is Bussy. Bussy would need waivers to go down to Providence next year. And if he had to go through waivers, someone is claiming him 3,000%. So that's the other end of it, where it's you can't have this much money tied up in goaltending, need a number one center, want to add to your forward core, potentially a defenseman. You got to round out your roster here. It was cool this year. I was pro tandem because it was kind of a transition year. It was a weird year. You were seeing what you had up front. There weren't a whole lot of expectations. Go see if the tandem works. And it did for the regular season. And then Swayman went on a great run in the playoffs. And that was that. It doesn't mean tandems can never work again. I think they've shown that it's good to split time and you keep goalies fresh and all that stuff. At the same time, though, as I said, you need other pieces to the lineup. You need a number one center. And another thing is, it'd be cool to get draft capital. Be cool to pick somewhere in the first 3 rounds. That'd be nice. Yeah. And I just, I look at teams like Colorado. They have a first round pick in 2024. And that's a team that just got bounced and, might want to solidify things in net. Again, I don't know if they're on his list or not. Carolina, New Jersey, these teams have some draft capital. And, because again, as we mentioned, and Sweeney was asked about this, trade returns for starting goalies are not always great. And, again, if you can get, everybody thinks, a first and a top 6 forward with control. Right. And that'd be awesome if you can do that. Natchez or Ty Anderson keeps mentioning Dawson Mercer with the Devils. That's awesome. Then you do that. But if it's just a first round pick or a second rounder and a prospect or something, I'm okay with that because you're still getting the cap space along with it too. And I think that's a great return as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll see what ends up happening with that. I want to get to that. I want to get to Debrusk. I want to get to the future Montgomery in a second. But first, quick word from our friends over at break in the action to tell you about my good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like Meek Mill and Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. And Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, Prize Picks will have your back and not count that as a loss. Testing my skills on Prize Picks this basketball season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps. Personally, with the Celtics going on a deep playoff run, I'm liking Jason Tatum more points. And I'm liking Derek White more points too. I met him at Fenway Park earlier this year, and I just have a feeling he's always gonna go off. So, to get in on the action, download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use that code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Now, back to the show. So, obviously, the Linus Ullmark thing is up in the air. See what happens with that. Should be interesting. I don't know what's going to happen. He's got to want to get dealt. I don't know if that's going to happen. They got to find some sort of trade partner for him. Jake Debrusk. Actually, you know what? One last thing on the Ullmark thing. I was debating whether or not we were going to do this. If you can't trade Linus Ullmark, would you consider dealing Jeremy Swayman?
No, I wouldn't. I think just looking at what they're trying to, you've got Pastrnak under contract for 8 years, or I guess 7 now, whatever the math is. McAvoy long term. You've got so many guys that are core pieces that are a year or two older, a couple of years older. Swayman is a part of that core, and I guess you could argue, in the next 3 to 4 years, if they don't accomplish anything, they might, change plans from there. But I think when you have a goalie at his age who wants to sign long-term, who you're able to sign long-term, has shown, especially in this past playoff run, what he's able to do, it's so hard to find a true franchise goalie at that age and with that, potential, that I unless you really got a king's ransom in return and were able to keep Ullmark for, the next 3-4 years, I don't see how that makes too much sense unless you're really trying to blow everything up and get as much as you could for him.
I would say Swayman would get you a lot, or at least he should, given his age and everything. I think it'd be a dumb idea to trade him. He's 25. Ullmark is 30. Again, wants to be here, proved he can play in the playoffs and elevate his game. You don't let that go. You don't do it. Obviously, he could get you a lot, but that's not the move you make. It isn't. And I've heard some rumblings out there of people, they should trade Swayman. I don't see it. I don't see it. I know that, they're so great with goalies and this and that. You have Bussy there, have him be the next Swayman behind Ullmark. That's not that easy.
Right. You're just hoping that he becomes Swayman, which you already have.
You already have.
Right.
Again, I rail on the Red Sox trading Mookie Betts. I'm not saying that Swayman is on the same level as Mookie Betts, but a player of that age who is that good, who has that kind of potential, who, you're not trading him. You're not. You keep those guys. You developed them on your own. Do not do that. Jake Debrusk, speaking of someone that the Bruins have developed, Jake Debrusk is up. He's a UFA. John Sweeney opened when he was asked about Debrusk, saying negotiations are a two-way street, which is a nice little code word for saying guy's probably gone. The vibe I got from Sweeney on Wednesday was that he is probably gone, or at least he'll test the open market. And if the open market isn't, what he hopes, then it'd come back. But he's definitely testing the open market. Where are you at with Jake Debrusk?
Yeah, I agree. I think that he's most likely gone, barring, the situation that you just brought up, if maybe he's not liking what he's seeing or what he's getting. But at the same time, I think, not that I've looked super closely at the cap situation for other teams at this point in the offseason, but I'd imagine there are other teams out there that'll give him what he's looking for. That seems like the Bruins kind of had their line and had their point. And even on Sunday, when the players were sort of doing their exit, media sessions and things like that, Debrusk is like, I can see a path. Door's still open, but you could kind of tell in his body language and just the way he was answering some questions, maybe he hasn't processed it all yet, but understands it's a very realistic scenario that he's not back the next season.
Yeah, when the Bruins, I've noticed that when the Bruins don't have guys locked up like that at this point, it usually means they're done. Again, there's exceptions. Would you re-sign him though?
For the right price, yes, I would. I think it's tough to put a specific number on that. I guess, maybe you could, but I think just it's tough because obviously in the playoffs he can in the regular season he can disappear at certain points of the season.
He's the
But then
opposite of everybody, which
right,
is
yeah,
usually they disappear in the playoffs. He somehow
right,
finds that he's like, all right, now it's time to try. But I
yeah,
agree with you.
yeah. So but again, it all comes down to how much he's going against the cap and how much that can relate to who else they can go get. Because I think if you have a true number one center and maybe, I don't know, hard to, but you got Marchand and Pastrnak on the wing already that can score a lot. He's a good like third, fourth winger that can drive plays, can score when he's on, and that's sort of what you hope for. You can get to the playoffs, and if he's able to turn it on in the playoffs, that's what everyone cares about anyway. So I think what he can bring you now, if he wants, an exorbitant number of years, an exorbitant amount of money per season, then I can see them being hesitant about that, especially if they feel they can get similar or better options on the open market. But then you run that risk of, can you bring in those guys? And that's sort of where the big conundrum lays. But I think for a reasonable price, I definitely would bring him back.
Like 2 hours ago, Connor Ryan and I were recording Poke the Bear, and I said, I made this exact same point. Like, you can go out and find his production in the free agent market. Like, you can find a guy to get you 40 points, 45 points, high steal, like Tyler Toffoli. I'd love for the Bruins to go after Tyler Toffoli. It's a guy who can finish, he can score, all that. But do those guys bring the penalty killing abilities, the defensive zone abilities, the ability to win puck battles, speed, all those things? I don't know if you're going to find that all in one guy. Like, everybody loves Tyler Bertuzzi, and I think Tyler Bertuzzi was terrific when he was here. He fit well with a guy like David Pastrnak. You're going to be hitting the wall when there's defensive zone issues there, when there's a bad pass, when there's a missed coverage. And like, again, you take that if a guy is putting up 55, 60 points. Like, all right, well, you know what? We knew that was coming, and that's okay if that's what you're okay with. But again, to me, my ideal contract for Debrusk would be 6 times 5.5 or at most 6 times 6. After that, that's when you start to get into, all right, if someone's going to give you 7 or 6.5 million per, good on them, but I'm not going to do that. That's kind of the line I draw, and I'm guessing the Bruins have a similar line where it's like, oh, we were aggressive with him, but we're not crossing that line. And I get where the Bruins are coming from in that sense, where it's like, this is a guy who has been consistently over 7 years, right? Like, it's great to produce in the playoffs. If he was at his potential all the time, right, he would be a 70-point getter, most likely. Like, he's tools, everything. If he was consistently just producing, he'd be in that area and he'd be getting a huge contract right now. And I think it's frustrating because it's like, you see those glimpses of offensive production, you see that stuff, and it's like, oh, where is that all the time? So it keeps him in that 5.56 range rather than moving up past that, which I think if he was, if he did what he did this year, it's like, all right, well, you're getting a big deal. And I just don't think he's at that yet. I want to continue on the DeBrusk thing. Just real quick, a quick word from our friends at Game Time. Quick break to tell you about my good friends over at Game Time. I am very excited about the NBA playoffs, and what's awesome is here in Boston, Celtics fans make TD Garden the best atmosphere for a playoff game. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Maybe it's the NBA playoffs, or it's the MLB regular season. Once the Celtics wrap up, which hopefully ends with a championship, Fenway Park is a great place to spend a summer day or night. Going from TD Garden playoffs to chill, exciting nights at Fenway Park is one of the best times of the year. With Game Time, there's last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and there's flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And there are zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. So, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, back to the show. So you had a Jake Debrusk point that I completely cut off with that ad read. What were you going to say on the topic of Debrusk?
Yeah. Just that I think while the Bruins would definitely benefit from bringing him back and, all the points you mentioned, just everything he can bring besides scoring and the type of player that he is when he's on, I also view him as a guy that could really benefit from a change of scenery. And looking at the history of, with the organization, obviously there was the whole trade request a few years ago, eventually came back. It seemed like last season he really felt was the most comfortable he felt. He was playing the best he was playing until he got hurt of the Winter Classic. And even in that game, he scored both goals. So he was sort of in top form. This past season, he talked about how stressful it was for him. And obviously he didn't start the way that he wanted to. And that kind of compounded itself. And eventually he found it all, found his way during the postseason. But I think with everything he's been through here, and he said he wants to stay. And I think if he got, a relatively long-term contract, that would sort of make him feel more comfortable, and maybe that would aid his performance. But I think if he gets a contract in another place, given everything that's happened with him here, I think I could see him doing really well just in a new situation and changing pace.
100%. I could see him flourishing in a different setting or situation. I think the big reason you would like to keep him is, and goes with any free agent, you don't know what a new free agent is going to be like in a new place.
Right.
It takes time to adjust, and Debrusk doesn't need any time to adjust. He's been here for 7 years. So, I completely agree with you on that, in that sense of, he's someone I think who would flourish in a new spot, in a new place, in a new locker room, with new coaches and all of those things. I think it begs the question of what do you think and what do you want the top six to be next year? I mean, are there guys that you're looking at? Are there free agents that you've been, taking a liking to? Where are you at with kind of the top six right now?
Yeah, I think I've been looking a little bit at it. I'd say, some of the pieces are already there. It's really that number one center, if you can go out and get it. And if you lose DeBrusk, getting another winger, maybe a second winger as well, just someone else on top of that to beef that up. You mentioned Tyler Toffoli. I agree. I think he would be great, especially with all the problems they had finishing the season up front. I think he'd be a great remedy for that. As far as Elias Lindholm, he came up at the trade deadline. Yeah. I think as far as guys that can, have proven that they can play, a top six center role, he's one of those guys that's realistically attainable. I think, I don't know if the Oilers are even going to try to trade him, but I know there's a lot of fantasy talk about bringing in Draisaitl, and that would be very exciting, but I don't know if they have I don't know if they have the capital to realistically pull that off. So yeah, sort of like the same thing, with getting rid of all, if you can do that and get a good price for him, great. But realistically, I don't see that happening. So I think Toffoli and Lindholm are two guys that are realistic and I think would fit very well with what Boston's doing and the way they're built and all that.
Yeah, early on, I think if you I think Zacha probably moves to the wing. I think you'd like to see Zacha move to the wing. He worked well there last year. And again, he could go down the middle if you need him to. But I think keeping him on the wing, putting him opposite Pastrnak, putting whoever that number one center is in the middle, Necas, Lindholm. Lindholm's an interesting case just because he's 30. But again, the two-way play is there. The offensive upside is there. I know he had that one amazing year in Calgary playing with Tkachuk and Gaudreau. probably going to get a lot of assists playing with David Pastrnak, and
Right.
Pastrnak
Yeah.
also proved to be a great setup guy this year. So, I mean, Lindholm can finish. And then that second line, if Coyle moves down to be the 2C, Marchand on the left, Toffoli on the right, I don't think Coyle is the best center for Brad Marchand, but I think if that's what you got, that's what you got. And Tyler Toffoli on the right is sort of a finisher. And again, that I would assume that line will move, both of those lines will move around quite a bit. Does Matt Poitras, where does he fit in? Like, does he have a great camp and they consider him for the top 6? Does he begin in Providence? I think you have a lot of question marks there, but like, that's a much better top 6. Yeah. And I think the other interesting thing is, like, if you kept Zacha down the middle and moved Coyle as the third line center, and then it's like, all right, well, you're a little bit deeper down the middle. I don't know, then I don't know what you do with Poitras or Geeky or guys like that, or Frederick. But, then you probably have to go out and get another top 6 winger instead. So I think the more attainable, vision is Zacha on the wing. New center number 1, Lindholm, Natchez, whoever is number 1, and then Coyle is number 2, and then a guy like Tyler Toffoli on the right side of that second line. I think that's your best bet. I mean, that's a pretty good top 6. Like, that's an improvement. I don't think that's like a bridge top 6 either. I think you can safely rely on that top 6 for a couple years, 2, 3, 4 years. As Toffoli and Lindholm age, you kind of see where they're at. Hopefully develop some more talent in and around that. And like, I think that's a team that's contending for a cup next year, and we make it sound so easy. We've laid it all out. They need to do this. They're right to the top of the odds. But again, I think that if you can roll that out, I think you're in a good spot. It just comes down to what the price is and what all that is. I would love Draisaitl, Leon Draisaitl. That would be great for us and create content. I mean, my God, can you imagine?
Yeah.
But the other one I would love is like Steven Stamkos. I would love Steven Stamkos. Like, why not? I mean, again, I think he goes back. What do you think? You think he goes back to Tampa?
I mean, I know they just traded for McDonough back, and that sort of like muddles the cap space. I'd be shocked if he doesn't. I mean, I feel like it's so uncommon. Like, but there's always seems like every franchise has that one or 1 to 2 players that they're just going to be their whole career, and like the way he's still performing, he's still can bring you so much, and he means so much to that city and that organization. I'd be shocked if they don't find some way to keep it all together.
He's synonymous with the Lightning. I'd be shocked if he didn't resign, but if he doesn't, like, I'm fine with. I would love the Bruins to go out and get him. I think he fits well. People were like, "Oh, he's a power play specialist," and I'm like, great. Sign me up. What, are you kidding me? Like, that's exactly what the Bruins need.
Yeah, 1 for 16 against Florida, I think, or something along those lines. Yeah.
He would have helped that out. So again, I think that's the likelihood of that is low, but I would love to see it happen. I think it'd be a really cool story. And he'd be a good veteran guy to get in that locker room. Joe, this has been awesome. Again, thank you so much for coming on. What can the people look forward to from you when we get back from looking for bears in the Poconos?
Right. Yeah. I mean, Hockey News will still have content going through the off season. It'll be my first off season with the site, so we'll still be piecing stuff out and unrolling some new things. But I'll be at the draft in Vegas. Not that that's going to be of much interest to Bruins fans, because
could be. Never know.
Yeah, I mean, unless a trade happens in the next month, then you never know. But I'll be out there, so keep a lookout for that. And other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, Joe, it's always a pleasure having you on. We'll have you on more throughout the summer. And that's been this week's Bruins Beat. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest